Hello and welcome to my channel Backyard Chevy. In today's video we'll be replacing this radiator on the Subaru Impreza, which is leaking all around the upper tank seal, and as you can see has been spraying all around the engine compartment. And it also looks like it may be starting to leak from the upper radiator hose, so we might as well replace that too. Well, let's not waste any more time looking around, and let's get started. Let's get started by removing this air intake duct. It'll have two clips to remove, but it has one that's missing, so let's remove the one that it does have. Using a screwdriver, pop up the middle of the clip so we can pull out the remainder of the clip. And we just gotta slide out the intake duct, which just happens to be sprayed with coolant as well. And since we're in this area, why don't we disconnect this fan connector? To do this, we'll want to lift up on this piece while we pull the connector apart to separate it. Now to remove the radiator cap. We want to make sure that the car has been sitting and allowed to cool off for more than an hour. You don't want to remove this cap on a hot car. It could spray out and burn you. Besides, you don't want to be working with hot coolant anyways. Now we'll want to slide under the vehicle. I lifted it and supported it with jack stands, which hopefully by now my videos have showed you how to do that. And to avoid making this video too long, I removed. We'll now need to remove this heat shield, held on by two screws which we'll need a 10mm socket for. I like to get them both loose so I could just remove them by hand while I hold up the heat shield. And now that they're both loose, let's hold up the heat shield and remove the screws. Now to remove the splash shield, which is held on by one bolt which we'll need a 12mm socket for, and two clips. To get this clip off, just use a screwdriver to pop up the center of the clip to remove the entire clip. The splash shield should begin coming down while you remove it, but it's still attached by one more clip tucked inside of the driver's side wheel well, which we'll want to do the same to remove. And the splash shield should just come out entirely now. Now to disconnect the next fan. We'll want to lift up on the same tab I showed previously as you pull apart the connector, which I pull away this hose from the guide to get a little more room to do so. And we may as well slide out the other hose while we're here. We'll now need a drain pan to catch the coolant we are about to drain, which if you watch till I get the radiator off, I show there's a less messy way to do this. But nevertheless, this method works too. I'll be draining it at the lower radiator hose, starting by using pliers on the hose clamp to squeeze and slide back the clamp, followed by disconnecting the hose. Now that we got the clamp slid back enough, we'll want to free up the hose, which they usually tend to be stuck onto. For this I try to rotate and wiggle the hose till it frees up. Once you feel it does, you'll want to pull the hose off slowly since you're about to get a flood of coolant. And to avoid a huge mess, I lift the drain pan up to the hose as I pull it off and guide it down, and this avoids a mess. Well, that wasn't too bad, was it? But trust me, it's not always that smooth. So you're better off waiting till I get the radiator off and show you the actual drain screw. Which hint, it's on the lower passenger side, and you'll need to remove the splash shield to do so. Okay, I guess I gave you the location already. Now to remove the upper radiator hose. Squeeze the clamp with pliers and slide the clamp back, then wiggle the hose off. You'll want to repeat the same for the other end of the radiator hose. As you can see, these hoses can really stick after years of being attached. For this next part, I used some of these vacuum plugs to avoid making a mess and getting transmission fluid everywhere. Yes, we gotta disconnect the transmission lines that attach to the radiator, but if you got a manual transmission, you won't have to worry about this step. So we go back underneath and use some pliers on these small clamps to slide them back enough to remove the hose. Same as the radiator hoses, you'll want to rotate and pull back to free them up, but you'll want to pull back slowly because transmission fluid will begin pouring out immediately as you do. So you'll want to put the plugs on as fast as you can to avoid losing much fluid. And you'll want to repeat this on the next hose. Pull back the clamp and wiggle the hose off. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared on that one. The other plug was not in my hand. We can now loosen and remove the two brackets that hold this radiator in place, and for this we'll need a 12mm socket. This bracket now should just lift off, but they do tend to stick. And now for the other side. And this radiator is now ready to come off. See how happy it is? It's just falling forward with excitement. Now we just gotta pull the radiator straight up. Bye bye radiator. Well, here's our new radiator next to our old one. As you can see, we got some parts to swap over. But first, as promised, here's that drain screw, which all you need is a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen and drain the coolant from the radiator. Now to swap over parts. First, let's remove this overflow, which all you gotta do is press in this piece and lift off the side of the overflow, which allows you to slide the whole top part out. Also disconnect the hose that attaches it to the radiator. Now just pull the overflow container up and out completely. Now to remove and transfer over these fans, which are held on by two screws which will need a 10mm socket for. And once you get both screws off, just lift and pull upwards to get it off the lower mounts. And now repeat the same process for the next fan. Now we gotta install the proper fittings for this radiator, which for this model we'll need to use these curved ones. Which it looks like they're both the same, so it doesn't matter which side goes where. When installing these, you do kind of want to match the angle in which they were pointing on the old radiator. You'll also want to be sure to get them on as much as you can by hand before using a wrench. We can now use a 19mm wrench to tighten them on as we hold the end in place. You don't need to tighten these too much. And now repeat for the other. Let's go ahead and install the fans next. By sliding them into the brackets, install and tighten the two screws. And then repeat for the next fan. Followed by reinstalling the coolant overflow. These are the two mounts which the radiator slides into, so let's go ahead and reinstall our new radiator, making sure they slide into these mounts. Begin sliding in our radiator slowly, moving any hoses or wiring out of the way as we do. Now that we got it in, we can reinstall our brackets to hold the radiator in place. And we could repeat for the other side. Once they're both in, we can tighten them both down. Now let's go ahead and reattach our fan. Followed by reattaching our transmission lines to the fittings. Making sure to slide over the hose clamp. And we can repeat for the next transmission line. Once we get the hose back on, make sure to slide the clamp back on this one as well. Making sure to also reconnect this fan. I'm going to be replacing both radiator hoses, so I'll be removing this lower one completely. This would be a great time to replace the thermostat, which is right behind this outlet held on by 2 bolts. It's been replaced recently, so I won't be changing it. Now to install a new radiator hose. Unfortunately, I had to use these other type of clamps because the old clamps would not fit. For these clamps, you just gotta use a flat blade screwdriver to tighten them on after you position them. Followed by this other clamp. You want to position them so they're easy to reach. Followed by the lower radiator hose. Making sure to install the clamps before you completely install the hose. And again, you want to position the clamps and tighten them with the screwdriver. And now that we got both hoses and clamps installed properly, we can install the heat shield. I forgot to mention, on these you'll want to install the screws first before the heat shield, so it can make threads on the plastic. Then remove them and install them with the heat shield. Install the splash shield next with the bolt and the 2 clips. We are now ready to add the coolant. For this one we'll be using this blue antifreeze that's meant for Subarus. It already comes pre-mixed, which you'll need about 1.5 of these containers, or you can get the non-mixed and mix it yourself with distilled water. And all we gotta do now is top it up, filling it with coolant till it stops going down, and put the cap back on. And we can't forget this intake duct plus the clips. And we also want to fill the reservoir to the full mark. Now we'll want to run it and let it get to operating temperature. And also you'll want to turn on the heater to get rid of any possible air pockets. Once again, you'll want to let it cool down and top it off if necessary. And you'll want to check your transmission fluid to make sure you didn't lose too much, and add some if necessary, which I lost very little, so I don't need to add any. And we are now finished. Well, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel. And please subscribe if you haven't done so.